Okay, so here's the bottom of the playfield. So we'll just take a quick glance. I was noticing before that there's some stuff missing. Let's see, we've got a lot of, up at the top we've got a lot of light bulbs, a few switches, all of that is fine. That kick out hole, everything there looks complete. We need to go through and replace all of the bulbs. Looks like about half of them aren't working. I don't know if they're just burned out or if the light board in the back needs some work. We've got our 3 saucers here that, pop bumpers here that look like nothing's missing from that. It's a shame, on a game like this, it's a shame whenever they've stolen parts off of it. Sometimes it takes you a while to even figure out what's missing. This all looks good. Okay, so it looks like our main problem was with the drop targets. About half of the drop target stuff is gone. So we've got even a spring missing off of one of these. These go up and on the actual target. Okay, and the main thing that's missing, there's a big plunger that goes in here and then it comes out and attaches to this. So that whole thing's missing. There's a bar and a plate that goes on the bottom that we've actually got over here. So this is the other stuff that goes on the bottom of that drop target. And I guess this is my missing spring. And we've got the 5 little studs, but if you look really close, it's supposed to have this C-clip on both sides. So they took the C-clip off to take them off and then lost the damn thing. So we're short those C-clips. We've got a few of the screws here that hold this on. So we got a little bit of the stuff, but what I'm basically going to have to do is there's I've got a drop target assembly from another game that was a Bally, and I think we're just going to have to cannibalize it and steal the parts off of it that we need. So we'll do that here in a few. So we'll steal the parts that we need off that other drop target assembly I've got, and get that back together and put in those new drop targets, which I've got here. Check that out. Isn't that going to be sweet? So our drop target assembly needs some work. All of our lights need replaced and the light sockets cleaned. Our kicker is fine. Our 2 kickers, slingshots, they look fine. Okay, and so the only other thing that is messed up is the flipper assemblies. They're still there, but somebody stole the coils off of them and the flipper stop at the top on both sides. So really there's not too much missing. We've got 2 coils missing, 2 flipper stops missing, there's a compression spring missing off of here, and then we've got a few little parts including a plunger missing off the drop target assembly. So it's not as bad as I thought. I thought there was like all kinds of stuff that had been stolen off of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the game off and I'm going to replace all of the light bulbs. So you can do it while it's on, but the problem that you run into is if I move this and I have to kind of bend it to get the bulb out, if you hit the wrong thing, heaven forbid you hit like one of the coils or whatever, you're putting voltages places that shouldn't have voltages. So I've done it before like that, but I'm trying to get where I don't break as much stuff while I'm working on it. So I'll turn the machine off. Basically you bend each one, pop the bulb out, and then if you look, the actual insert is usually filthy. So you can take like a Q-tip and get it wet and kind of just rub it on the back of the lens to clean that up a little bit. So we'll have to do a lot of that because you can see that dirt through the playfield. So like whenever the light comes on, it lights up that lens and the lens is dirty. So from the top side you see a bunch of dirt over the light. So we'll clean up all that and we'll replace all the bulbs next, and then I'll pull out that drop target assembly that I've got in the back and we'll see if we've got all the parts that we need. All right, folks, so we went through and replaced all the bulbs, cleaned up all the little sockets, you can see, as good as we could. So I'm going to go into the bulb test and see which ones are not working. So that basically makes all of them blink. So you can go around and see which ones aren't doing their thing. So like this one isn't. Sometimes you can just spin them to get them going. So that one is not working. So we got one here. We got one here. So that's two. Got one here. That's three. Got one here. That's four. Got several here. 5, 6, 7. All these are doing their thing. This one's a little weak. I might need a little spin. A little better. And then all of those are working except for this top one. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'll write down, there's 8 of them that aren't working. So I'll write down all of them and the color of the wire going to them. Sometimes on ones like these, where they're all together, it makes you suspicious that it might be the wire running to them, but it looks like that's all connected to this one, which is working. And oh, this one's out too. Boy, it sure looks like. So 8 or 9 of them that aren't working. So I'm going to write down all of them that aren't working, and then we'll look in the schematics and see what that could be. All right, so this is my list that I came up with. There were 9 bulbs that were not working, right? Now, if you'll remember in the first video, I didn't work on this light board. I left it alone. So if I would have went ahead and done the preventative stuff on this, I'll bet about half of them probably wouldn't have been a problem. But I figured I'd work through it just to show you kind of what's going on. So this is the lamp board out of the Bally pinball machine. Basically, this controls every lamp on the game. Now that's computer controlled. Some of the lamps are just always on. That's the general illumination, and they're all working fine. So this board is in almost every early Bally game. Sometimes there's also a separate one that has even more of these on it. I think they're called SCRs. And it'll be an auxiliary board, and it's if they just have more lamps. So some of the games like Kiss, I think, has an auxiliary board because it's got the little light at the top that does the Kiss letters. So what I did was I wrote down a description of the bulb. Like, so for instance, this one was a B. This one lit up 2000, so that's what it says on the front of the playfield. And then I wrote down the color of the wire. And then if you go in to the schematics, there is one page here that shows you all the connections. So it kind of gives you a description of what each bulb does on the lamp driver board. And then next to it, it has a couple numbers. So for instance, this first one said B. So let's see here, J116. I ended up figuring out that on the saucer, it's the B light on the saucer up in the top right hand corner. And you'll see next to it, that's pin J116. And then next to it, it says 12. So what that is it tells you the color of the wire. So you can confirm down here the wire color code. 12 would be a red wire with a blue stripe. And I had written down that in the game it's a red wire with a blue stripe. So I know that's that one. So basically that wire, blah, 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 blah. So once you figure out what connector it is, J116, you can go to this other schematic. Only reason you can't just use this one is because it doesn't say the wire colors. But if you go down to J1 16, which is here, you can see that, yes, it says it's the B saucer, and then you follow it over, and it's Q11, right? So I wrote down on here the connector and Q11. So if we go to the board, here's our J1 connector, right? And it's pin 16. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. If I got that right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay. So it's the fourth one from the middle there. Let's see if I can get a good shot of it. It's that pin there, the fourth one from this hole. 1, 2, 3, 4 over. I don't have a ton of light on it, but what I can tell you just by looking at it here in person is that all of those pins look filthy. They're all kind of oxidized and corroded. You can see it good there. So, you know, some of those pins aren't going to be making good electrical contact. So I'm going to clean those with a file. And then if you look on the back, it's never been resoldered. So especially some of these ones on the ends might have bad solder joints on them. So it also needs to be resoldered on each pin. And then, after I do that, we need to check out Q11. So Q11 is this one right here. And as I'm looking, it looks fine. But we'll test it. You know, we'll go through and we'll test all of them and see which ones of them test bad. Just my personal experience on these Bally boards, a lot of times you'll get kind of tricky readings where one will test fine, but it doesn't work. So sometimes you have to replace it even if it tests fine. But this first time what we'll do is we'll clean all these pins, and then I'll test all of the ones to see if I can find any that are bad and replace them. And then we'll try it back in the game and see how many of them that has fixed for us. Now it could also be the connector in the game where it goes on, the little pin that's inside the connector. It could be all messed up and need to be replaced. So it makes good connection to the connector on the side. If you this one over here, this connection here is the connection that comes from the motherboard. So it sends all the signals in. So sometimes you'll notice on the same chip you'll get the same one's not working. So for instance, you'll get the top 4 don't work, and then on this chip the top 4 don't work, and on this chip the top 4 don't work, and on this chip the top 4 don't work. And that's if you get something real a pattern like that, it's because one of your signals isn't getting through, which comes from J4, which is this top connector. This bottom connector, J2, what it usually does is most of the stuff in the back box. So like on J2, it's the shoot again light, the ball and play light. It's got a few from the playfield, but the match light, the high score to date light, the second player up light, blah, 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 blah. So most of your back box lights come off of this connector, but there's a few playfield ones that come off there too. And then both of these are usually all the playfield stuff. But the schematics show all that. So what we'll, like I said, we'll clean these connections. We'll resolder all of the pins on the back. And then we'll go through and we'll test all of these SCRs to see if we can find any bad ones. Okay, so I'd cleaned that. All of the little SCRs tested fine. There wasn't any of them bad. And so I put it back in and all the lights are working. So it was just really bad connections on those connectors. The pins were all filthy. The solder didn't look that bad. I don't think I needed to resolder it, but I went ahead and did it. But as you can see, all the lights are working. Very cool. So that's one less thing. Oh, these green ones don't light up very bright. That's just a problem with green inserts. But they're all working. So now, next thing is I'm going to work on that drop target. And I found that other assembly that I had that's out of something, but it's got my plunger that I needed. And it's got my little, I don't have all of them. It's got some of my little C-clips that I needed. So we'll go through and see if we can take the parts off this and put it on the other one and go ahead and install all of our drop targets. Alright folks, so I was able to piece that back together. If you see on the front, I mean on the upper part, they are doing their thing. So this piece we had the screws. This bar we had that goes all the way through. The little clips we had, but we were missing a bunch of those C clips, so I was able to take them off the other one. There was, remember, the one spring was missing, but it was in the box, so I had the extra spring. There was little posts that go at the bottom of each drop target. We had those, but it was missing some of the C clips. So the main thing that we were missing was this plunger. So the one on my other drop target setup was a slightly different design, but I had this plunger in the back on an old Matahari playfield, which is the same playfield that we were able to take this ball gate off of. So the Matahari, believe me folks, is really, it's not an entire machine, it's just the playfield that we already swapped out of a machine years ago. The playfield's destroyed, so we're taking original parts off of it and making it all work. So we've got this basically to reset the targets. This pulls in, pushes them up. I don't know yet if these are going to drop right. Might have to oil some stuff or whatever, but we've got it all back together at least. So the last thing that we need to replace is the parts that are missing off of the flippers. So the coil is missing, the coil stop is missing, the screws are missing, but I think they're over here on the counter, and one of the little compression springs is missing. So I started looking through my stuff, right? So let's see if we've got the, this is the plunger off of the other drop target setup. It was a little different, it wouldn't work. So we've got the screws, so we need 4 of these black screws to hold on the coil stop. We've got those, so we've got the screws. The compression spring we don't have here, but I've got a box of parts. I've got all kinds of stuff over here. Old junk, blah, blah, blah. And I believe this is my compression spring. So I think I've got that, okay. I've got brand new plunger and link that we ordered from Marco years ago, I believe, or a while back. Looks like about a year ago. We always replace those on Bally's just because it makes it nice and snappy, right? And then, you want to see something sexy? Look at this. Marco Specialties coil stop for a Bally flipper. So we ordered a bunch of those at some point too, so we've got those. And so the last thing is the actual coils themselves. So if you look in the manual, it says parts list, Star Trek, flipper, left and right. It's supposed to be an AQ 25-500/34-4500. So the 25-500, that means there's 2 windings in each coil. Flipper coils are like that. So that's one winding, and that's the other winding. So 25, that's the gauge of wire, and 500 revolutions around the core. 34 gauge wire, and 4,500 revolutions around the core. So wouldn't you know, in my parts box, look at that. That's the exact coil I need, with the diodes and everything. And not only that, but I've got a matching one here, the same thing. And not only that, I've even got an extra. I don't know how in the world that worked out, but it did. So I'm going to put these 2 pretty ones on there. Brand new, never used. So we have the spring, the screws, the coil stop's brand new. We're going to put new plungers on it, and we're going to put brand new, never used coils on it with, by the way, brand new coil sleeves. You want that sleeve to be new. Now, if I had the original coils, or if I had old coils, that'd be completely fine. Coils usually don't go bad, they just burn up. So either they work or they don't work. So if you've got an old coil that's used, if the coil that's still in the game, if you can replace this coil sleeve, if that will slide out, let's see if I can do it with one hand. I can't get to it, but
If the coil sleeve will move like that, if you can pop it out and put a new one in, then you're fine. Sometimes it's shorted, so you can check that and everything. One of your diodes might be bad, although that's pretty rare. But if you've got a used coil, that's just as good as a new coil usually, unless it has some kind of physical damage to it. But we're going to go ahead and put our new coils in because they're missing. We're going to put our coil stops in. We're going to put our compression spring and our new plungers on, and that will get our flippers doing its thing. So we'll turn a few screws and be back in just a second.
Okay, one other thing we're going to do, this is the flipper bushing right here. It goes through the playfield and is what holds the flipper bat off of the playfield. So if you get an area where it's dragging the playfield, it's usually because this bushing's worn out. So we've removed the old one. We're going to replace it with a brand new shiny one. We're going to put 2 new flipper bushings on it too, just to make it extra nice and extra snappy. All right, folks, so here we are under the playfield. I wanted to show you kind of how this pawl works here. Basically, the shaft of the flipper goes down through the playfield, through that bushing, and into this little pawl. So there's little screws, set screws on the side that you change to adjust where that flipper bat is set. And you want to leave it with just a little bit of wiggle up and down. Because if you're too tight, basically you'll have this smashed against the flipper bushing, and if there's no play, it makes it harder for it to turn. You want it to all be free moving. So when you pull in the thing, it should spin around and snap back nice and sharp. Same thing with the one over here. There's just a slightest little bit of play. And it's nice and snappy, like we've been talking about, very snappy. And I still have to solder on all my wires. Right, so on the top we put new bats on and new rings, of course. Now, one of the things about the older games is people differ on how they want the bat to be adjusted. So a lot of times what you'll see is the bat will be hanging a little bit, which is probably actually more correct than the way I do it. So this one over here would be down a little bit, and it would be a little bit closer to these dots, right? So maybe the tip of the bat would be aimed at the dot. So it would be a little bit sagging a little bit. The reason you would want it like that is so that it would make it easier to hit the wide shots, because the bat would actually be farther down. It has to do with all of the physics of the playfield, right? So it might make it easier to hit the wide shots. Personally, I always put mine where they're lined up with the rails. So the reason I do that is because when the ball rolls down, you can get some really good action off the end of the flipper. And it just makes it flow a little better. That's how most modern machines are. So if you play a game from the 90s or one of the newer Stern ones or the Jersey Jack ones, they'll be adjusted like that. But usually they have steeper end lanes, so the flippers will be down farther anyway. I like them like this just because they're lined up. I think it even looks better, and it also gets rid of a little bit of your area between the flippers. So I like them like that. Some people may like them down a little bit. You kind of need to play the game a little bit. Like if I keep having trouble making that shot, then maybe I'll drop it a little bit so it'll make it a little easier to make it. But I think that's how we're going to leave them for now. You can see on the really older games, sometimes they just had all kinds of different stuff going on. So it really depends on your game. We've got you can see this laser ball Williams that I was working on a while back. We left, since it's a wide body, we left them where they're hanging just a little bit to make sure you can make the wide shots. And then on this on this Comet, as we got them, they're hanging a little bit, but we haven't worked on it yet, so I'll probably move it up a little bit. But that's something that, you know, is just different for everybody. It just depends on what you're really into. So the flippers are on, the drop targets are on. I need to mess with that one little post I was talking about, but we're pretty much done with the playfield. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to check to see if I've got a better apron at home for it. If I don't, we're going to work on this apron that we've got. We're going to clean up the back glass a little bit, and we're going to swap the coin door
we're going to do a little touch-up paint on the cabinet, and we're going to install the shooter rod. So there's still lots of little stuff to do, but we're working right through it. So I'll check for the apron at the house, and we'll start messing around with some of this cabinet stuff next. Okay folks, so we've done some more cosmetic stuff. We repainted the yellow that was worn on the front. It's not a perfect match, but it looks a lot better than the worn spots did. We swapped the coin door. We're also going to put a Bally sticker on the front of it. I guess we got to replace the light bulbs too. But we swapped a nicer coin door on. The other one was messed up. We installed our shooter rod. Got it working good. Put a drop of oil on it so it's working great. And the game is actually up and running. We haven't played it yet. Oh, we put the apron on. We haven't played it yet, but because the last thing that we need to do is check the switches. So I'm going to show you kind of a little trick about that on these Bally's. So if you go into the test menu, I can't remember which one it is. That's the first time you press the test button. It does all the lights. Second time does all the displays. Of course, we already worked through those. Third time does all the coils. So the 10th one didn't do anything, but that's probably not actually used. So. And so that was the sound test. I'm not sure if that's proper. It sounds like it might be. Okay, and then the next one, see the little 0 that's flashing over there? That's what you want. Sometimes you'll get a number, like, so if I hit this switch, right, I'm getting a 20. And I'm holding the switch down, and the 20 keeps flashing. So if I let go of the 20, it goes back to 0. You know what I mean? So what that'll do is that'll show you if a switch is stuck. So I'm going to show you one little thing about the switches, and then we're kind of done until we film the thing being played. Let me find a good example here. Some of the switches underneath the playfield have a little cap on them. So like this is a good example here. Whoop. This little cap here, you see how, whoop, excuse me, you see how one leg has been broken off of this cap. So the cap was over both of the wires on the switch. I don't know how well you can see that. And someone has, now remember this is under the playfield, somebody has removed that cap. So let's see if it'll do what I think it's going to do here. Whoop. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's for some other reason, but the reason that cap is there is because on some of the switches, if it's a switch that you hit really fast, so for instance, this center switch, if you're going to hit that really fast, and so you see, if I hold it, it lights up, but if I just hit it really fast, most of the time it doesn't register. So what they do is they put that cap on from the factory on the switches that are like that, so that it prolongs the signal sent to the motherboard. So sometimes the problem you'll have is you'll have switches that are stuck on, and if you look under the playfield, it'll be one of the switches with that cap sometimes, because that cap can actually short out. So if you get one that's stuck on, and no matter what you do, it's still stuck on, check that little cap. Now it will work without the cap, but sometimes you'll miss shots. So like sometimes it'll hit the switch, but it won't register because that cap's not on there. If it's ones like these rollovers, when the ball goes over that, it has a little bit of time that it goes over it, so it's easier for it to see the switch closure. And so those usually don't have that kind of a cap on them. So that's just one last little thing about the switches. So all that's really left with this one is we're going to, since none of the switches are stuck, I guess I should check to see if they're all working. They seem to be. Let me see what else we got here. All the switches seem to be all right, with the possible exception of the drop targets, but I think they'll be good.
So it looks like most of the switches are, I think all the switches are working, all the lights are working, all the coils are working. So the only thing left to do is to play it a little bit and see if anything breaks and then fix that. And also we need to slide that back glass in. But we're going to save that for our final video, which shows us actually playing the game. So we'll clean this thing up, get it all buttoned up, and we'll film a video of us actually playing it and go over the rule set and how all the artwork is and all that. But this will be the last of our repair videos on this Bally Star Trek. Now, if you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. Make sure and leave your comments below. And we'll see you on the next video where you can see how it all turned out with the glass on it.